The Australian tractor market is dominated by the same conversation it has had for 2 decades: horsepower figures, cab comfort ratings, and finance terms. Meanwhile, independent workshops across Australia consistently highlight 4 brands for a different set of reasons entirely: parts availability, mechanical access, and a diagnostic process that does not require a laptop and a factory subscription before the first bolt is turned. These are not the brands that win the most floor space at the ECA or the Royal Melbourne Show. They are the brands that regional workshop technicians, the ones who service everything from a neighbor's ancient header to a neighbor's brand new sprayer, quietly recommend when someone asks what they would put on their own place. 4 of those brands are examined here, starting with the one that generates the most consistent praise in the sub-100 horsepower discussion. In 4th place, Kubota's reputation among independent Australian mechanics is built on 2 things that rarely appear in a manufacturer's press release. The first is engine accessibility. The V-series 4-cylinder diesel that powers the M5 and M7 utility range, covering the 90 to 170 horsepower bracket most relevant to mixed livestock and light cropping operations, is designed with service points that are reachable without removing major panels or subframes. Oil drain, filter housing, fuel filter, and coolant reservoir are all accessible within the standard service bay or in the field with a basic toolkit. That design decision sounds unremarkable until a technician has spent an afternoon removing bodywork from a competing machine to reach the same service points. The second is parts turnaround. Independent workshop discussions across farm tender community and tractor and machinery forums consistently note that Kubota genuine parts arrive through the Kubota Australia dealer network within 1 to 3 business days to most regional centers, and that the aftermarket equivalent supply chain for common wear items like filters, belts, and seals is equally well developed, offering a backup option at lower cost when turnaround is more important than badge matching. A farming operation that loses a machine during harvest cannot wait a week for a part. The combination of an organized genuine supply chain and a competitive aftermarket supply chain for the same platform is what independent workshops are describing when they say a brand is practical to support. Known weak points that regional technicians flag for Kubota M-series machines in Australian conditions are the front axle oscillation pin, which needs greasing at every service and replacement at around 3,000 hours. Parts cost approximately 240 Australian dollars through an independent workshop. And the hydraulic filter bypass valve, which merits a specific inspection at the 3,000-hour mark, rather than being treated as a standard filter swap, with the inspection adding approximately 90 Australian dollars to a routine service. Fuel consumption in the M5 series 90 horsepower bracket runs at approximately 4.5 to 5 liters per hour under moderate load. 3-point linkage lift capacity in the M5091 sits at approximately 2,400 kilograms at 24 inches behind the lift point, which is adequate for most mixed property work. Warranty terms for Kubota in Australia should be confirmed with Kubota Australia directly, as the Australian market terms are specific to this market and should not be assumed from any other regional offering. The machine delivers what independent workshops describe as a level of service practicality that its modest asking price on the Australian dealer forecourt does not begin to reflect against machines of comparable capability from premium European brands. In 3rd place, Massey Ferguson draws consistent praise from independent Australian mechanics for a reason that predates every model currently on the market. The Perkins engine heritage that underpins the MF range has generated decades of workshop familiarity across every region of Australia where tractors work. The current Massey Ferguson range, distributed through AGCO Australia, spans the compact, utility, and mid-range segments. And while the current generation of AGCO-era Massey Ferguson machines uses a more complex electronics package than the pre-Tier 4 machines that appear most frequently in independent workshop recommendations, the brand's reputation for parts availability and structural accessibility has carried through to current models in independent workshop assessments. Parts availability for Massey Ferguson in Australia operates across two channels that independent workshops value equally. The AGCO Australia Dealer Network provides genuine parts coverage nationally, with dealer representation reaching into regional Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and Western Australia at a density that most competing brands cannot match in the utility segment. Alongside that, the global aftermarket supply chain for Massey Ferguson, supported locally by suppliers like SpareXAU and Borelli Parts for older model components, means that a workshop encountering an older MF alongside a current one is never working without a supply option for either. That depth of coverage across the full age range of machines in the field is what independent technicians mean when they describe a brand as practical. Known weak points that regional workshops flag for current Massey Ferguson 6 Series machines include the Dyna 6 transmission clutch pack synchronizers, which can show wear at around 2,500 to 3,000 hours on machines used frequently for loader work. Rebuild cost approximately 1,800 to 2,200 Australian dollars through an AGCO accredited workshop. And the transmission breather, which benefits from a specific inspection in dusty Australian conditions at the 2,000-hour mark to prevent internal pressure buildup and seal degradation, a preventive check that costs approximately 60 Australian dollars at a routine service. Routine service on the MF 6 Series every 250 hours costs approximately 160 to 180 Australian dollars through an independent workshop. Fuel consumption in the 100 to 115 horsepower bracket runs at approximately 7 to 8 liters per hour under moderate broadacre load. Badge recognition for Massey Ferguson at the clearing sale remains strong enough to support competitive resale values across most of regional Australia, which is the final piece of the independent workshop recommendation, because a machine that retains its value is a machine that its owner can afford to replace with something equally practical. With two brands still to come, the pattern in this list is becoming clear. Parts accessibility and diagnostic simplicity are the consistent thread. Coming to second place, Case IH draws independent workshop praise for a reason that is specific to the Australian broadacre context. The Case IH dealer network in Australia, administered through CNH Industrial Australia, covers the grain belt regions of South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, and Western Australia, with a density that is directly relevant to the farms where Case IH machines work hardest. For a broadacre grain grower running Case IH equipment through harvest, the combination of a dealer within a manageable distance and a parts supply chain geared to the seasonality of Australian cropping operations is not a minor convenience. It is the difference between a machine that gets back into the field within a day and a machine that sits in the shed, waiting for a part that arrives from interstate. Independent workshop assessments of Case IH in Australian conditions consistently highlight the Maxim and Puma series in the 100 to 160 horsepower bracket as machines that combine reasonable electronic complexity with an accessible service architecture relative to some competitors in the same power band. The Case IH fault diagnostic system is accessible to independent workshops equipped with a CNH-compatible diagnostic tool, a meaningful distinction from brands that require factory-level proprietary access for standard fault resolution, and one that reduces both the cost and the response time of repair events in regional locations. Known weak points that independent technicians note for Case IH Maxim and Puma series machines in Australian conditions include the rear axle oil seal, which can develop slow weeping on machines working on uneven terrain at around 2,500 hours, with a repair cost of approximately 260 to 300 Australian dollars through an independent workshop familiar with the CNH platform, and the front linkage position sensor, which can produce nuisance fault codes at around 2,000 hours in dusty conditions. Diagnosis and sensor replacement costs approximately 320 to 380 Australian dollars through an accredited Case IH workshop. Routine service every 250 hours on the Maxim series, costs approximately 170 to 190 Australian dollars through an independent workshop. Fuel consumption in the 115 horsepower bracket runs at approximately 8 to 9 liters per hour under moderate broadacre load. Warranty terms for Case IH Australia are administered through CNH Industrial Australia and should be confirmed with the Australian dealer at the time of purchase. The Case IH Puma carries a level of broadacre engineering credibility in the Australian grain belt that its dealer network density supports from a servicing perspective. And independent workshops note that the combination of those two factors makes it a more practical machine to own in remote broadacre locations than several of its premium competitors at similar price points. And finally, in first place, Deutz-Fahr draws a specific and consistent form of praise from independent Australian mechanics that separates it from the other brands in this countdown. The praise is directed at the air-cooled engine heritage of older Deutz machines and at the continued mechanical accessibility of the current SDF Group platform in the utility and mid-range segments. The Deutz air-cooled diesel, which powered the brand's machines through several decades of Australian sales, is described in independent workshop discussions as the closest thing to a maintenance-proof agricultural engine that the market ever produced at commercial scale. No coolant system, no thermostat, no water pump, no radiator. In an Australian summer, those are not trivial omissions. They are the removal of the four components most likely to generate a heat-related service event, as established in the data examined in the Kubota versus Coyote versus Yanmar comparison in this series. The current Deutz-Fahr range distributed in Australia through the SDF Group network has moved to water-cooled engines in compliance with emissions requirements, which removes the air-cooled advantage from new machines while preserving the reputation that drives the brand's independent workshop endorsement. Current Deutz-Fahr 5 and 6 series utility machines in the 80 to 130 horsepower bracket draw praise for a different set of mechanical characteristics: cab access to major service points, a relatively straightforward electronic architecture relative to some European competitors in the same bracket, and a parts supply chain that, while smaller than the Kubota or Case IH networks in Australia, operates efficiently through the SDF Group's Australian dealer representation. Known weak points that regional workshops note for current Deutz-Fahr utility machines in Australian conditions include the hydraulic remote valve seals, which can develop slow weeping at around 3,000 hours. Repair cost approximately 240 to 290 Australian dollars through a workshop familiar with the SDF platform, and the cab pressurization seal on higher specification models, which degrades more quickly in dusty broadacre conditions and merits inspection at around 1,500 hours, with replacement costing approximately 210 to 260 Australian dollars. Routine service every 250 hours on the Deutz-Fahr 5 series costs approximately 160 to 180 Australian dollars through an independent workshop with SDF platform experience. Fuel consumption in the 100 horsepower bracket runs at approximately 7 to 8 liters per hour under moderate broadacre load. Warranty terms for Deutz-Fahr in Australia should be confirmed with the SDF Group's Australian distributor at the time of purchase. For independent Australian mechanics, the Deutz-Fahr recommendation is rooted in a specific form of engineering respect. The brand has produced machines that work in the paddock for decades without generating the diagnostic complexity that drives service costs on competing platforms. That respect persists across the transition from air-cooled to water-cooled engines, because the mechanical philosophy behind the machines has remained consistent, even as the engine technology has changed to meet regulatory requirements. Across all four brands examined here, one truth stands out. The recommendations that emerge from independent Australian workshops are not based on showroom impressions or finance term comparisons. They are based on the experience of working on these machines in the field.